Hello, 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 and welcome back to Coach's Corner. I am your host, Lucas Kochevar. As always, we are back. It is a Tuesday, August 6th, and we have a good show to get to. We got a wide receiver that could be browsing Zillow for homes sooner than later. We have Olympic basketball that is ongoing as we speak. Hopefully, I think the U.S. might have won already. If not, we'll see. We're up a decent amount on Brazil, but never say never, am I right? But first things first, we continue our preview through the AFC. We touched on the South, and baby, we are going north. We're going north to four teams that I would say are prominent in the NFL in one way or another, whether it's playoff contention the past couple of years, a Super Bowl berth here and there, or a historic franchise that has multiple Super Bowls. We have the AFC North, one of the hard-nosed, fun divisions, I think, where the football isn't always great, but it's very, defensive driven, very ugly, northern, grinded out kind of football. I feel like it might be the one, division where, the region I feel like really takes after the football and that north, the belt there where it's Ohio, you have Baltimore, you have Pittsburgh. Those cities I feel like all kind of come together for what I would say is relatively, like I said, hard nosed, strong football that plays in the winter. And it's a division that saw three teams make the playoffs last year. And one of those teams is projected to be a playoff team by all accounts because people love the quarterback there. And I would feel like this division could also be argued as the best in football. And I know we have, a couple divisions here and there that have, two teams that are so good that you would think, hey, maybe they're one of the best divisions. But if you go from 1 to 4, I feel like this is the strongest division just because of what I said earlier. Three playoff teams, and granted, none of them made the Super Bowl. Now, they had three chances and none of them made it. But regardless, three very high quality teams. And starting off with the Cleveland Browns, that is one of those teams that did make the playoffs. They were, promptly, taken out of it by C.J. Stroud and the Texans. And the man, the myth, the legend, the comeback player of the year, Joe Flacco, is not walking through that door. That is right. He is signed elsewhere. He is in Indianapolis. I actually didn't even mention him yesterday during my Colts preview, but he's no longer on the team. And now they do have Jameis Winston. But the guy that they really need to depend on is the guy at the quarterback position. It is Deshaun Watson. And, you could say the Browns maybe have the best roster in all of football. If you go from every position group, to if they are healthy, that's another big qualifier here. Because, God, they were beat up last year, but they still managed to make it to the playoffs. If you look at every group they probably do have a top 5 to 7 type of player outside of maybe, wide receiver. They have Amari Cooper, who there's a lot of good receivers in the NFL, but Amari Cooper was terrific last year. David Njoku's probably a top 5 tight end. Their offensive line has been steady for the past couple of years. Myles Garrett, defensive player of the year on the other side. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, I believe is how you say it, and linebacker on the other side. Denzel Ward, just guy after guy. You can name a lot of dudes on this roster. And I didn't even mention Nick Chubb, who's coming back from an ACL injury. But none of it matters if that quarterback position does not, pick up what they were traded for in Deshaun Watson, which, he has just been dreadful ever since he's been traded. And I don't know if it's the shoulder injury. I don't know if it's just the weird surrounding cloud he has mentally of what has happened to him since he has, made it to Cleveland. Since his departure from Houston. Like I said, all very ugly stuff. He's the nasty man. But regardless, if we're just talking about football, and that's just what we're going to do here right now, is just talk about football. If Deshaun Watson can return to half of the player that he was during his best years in Houston, I think Cleveland could win this division. Now, I say that as a big, big, big if, because frankly, I don't think that'll happen. I think Deshaun Watson was a top 5 quarterback when he was in that mode. The man we haven't seen has just not been that. And maybe it's just a byproduct of, he was still getting back into football shape. He's still recovering from injuries here and there because, he sat out basically a year and a half and just didn't play football he's basically not played a meaningful game of or a meaningful season of football in the past 3 years, I'd say. Three or more years. Like, it's been a long road for Deshaun Watson, and whether you like him or not, which a lot of people don't, which I understand, he just hasn't really gotten the opportunity to really get back into himself. And that this is probably the year to change that, because I feel like if they don't get it going, if it's another season or he goes through it and they're just bad, they're going to find a way to move off of him. They're going to move on to Jameis Winston. And I mean, I don't know how much longer Kevin Stefanski can hold out being like, hey, I just need a quarterback, because like I said, they've done great things under Kevin Stefanski. They did it with Baker, and they survived last year with Joe Flacco. But now they go back to Deshaun Watson. It's going to be his show, and I frankly don't know if that's going to be a good thing for them this year. Because like I said, it's a great roster. It's a win now roster, but you can't win now if that quarterback doesn't play well. And I feel like that's a big issue that the Browns are facing. So we'll see how they do. But speaking of a quarterback that is coming back from injury, the Cincinnati Bengals, Joe Burrow is coming back. Probably the biggest acquisition is just him playing, hopefully this year, if he can stay healthy. Kind of getting to that point now where that's a question we got to ask every year, because he's dealt with some injuries, in his young NFL career. I say young NFL career, his 6-year, 5-year NFL career now. He's dealt with some pretty, I'd say, big injuries. And so is that going to linger over him this year? Is he going to have one of those setbacks once again this year? I don't know. But even if he doesn't get hurt, I am concerned about this Bengals offense. And I'm concerned about this Bengals defense, because I feel like this Bengals team, if you look at the roster, it's a lot of betting. It's a lot of gambling on guys you hope develop, guys you hope grow up really quickly. And I'm not sure if I buy that, because they lost their starting running back, Joe Mixon. And I was burnt by the Joe Mixon fantasy bug a couple years ago. But even outside of fantasy sports, if we're talking about on the field product, I mean, Joe Mixon was probably about as steady as a running back as you can get in the NFL, on the field, I should say. And now they have a fringe starter in Zach Moss, who, like I said, he was very productive for the Colts when Jonathan Taylor was out. But I don't buy Zach Moss as a starter in this league. I buy him as a good backup, like a really strong backup, not a starter. And that's what they're going to bank on, or they're going to bank on Chase Brown stepping up into his role. And like I said, a young player stepping up and being the guy. The wide receiver in core, Jamar Chase is going to get paid soon. That's going to cause a lot of discussion about how much you can pay a receiver, because Jamar Chase is going to get a bag. And they already have that issue right now with T. Higgins, who's their wide receiver too, and who reluctantly kind of signed with the team to stay on for this, with a franchise tag, because he wants to be paid, but he can't right now, because you have to pay Jamar Chase and you have to pay Joe Burrow now. Like, you already paid Joe Burrow. It's just a lot of questions right now. And then their slot guy, their trusty slot guy, who I loved as their third guy, was Tyler Boyd. He's a safety valve kind of player, and you just lose him to Tennessee, and you don't really replace him. Like I said, you hope that your Andre Iovisas, I believe, you hope he steps up. He's a guy they drafted a couple years ago. He's now going to be their slot guy, and they're banking on him stepping up. Their tight end position, I mean, you go through each position group and you just see it's like you're kind of banking on some talent here. It's the fourth tight end in 4 years, I believe, for the team. They went through CJ Uzoma, I believe, Hayden Hurst, Irv Smith last year, and now they have Mike Gesicki this year. So it's their fourth tight end in 4 years. One of those positions where I think you're just better off having a guy steady, whether he's good or not, like good to average. I feel like you'd rather just have an average guy who's consistent, because your quarterback is trusting of him, and I feel like tight end is just one of those positions you just need to have consistency with. So that's a new guy on offense, and they drafted Amarius Mims out of Georgia. That's a rookie on the offensive line, with a lot of guys you already paid also in free agency. You see where I'm going with this. It's a lot of gambling, a lot of betting on guys either stepping up as young players, or it's a lot of, we just kind of hope things run with Joe Burrow as our leader. And that defense, a lot of that secondary is kind of gone on throughout the years. Jesse Bates with Atlanta now, they've been banking on those safeties stepping up. it's just one of those teams where I would not be shocked if the Bengals had a bad year, like a setback year, and we kind of get the Zach Taylor on the hot seat news, or he's fired. Like, I'm just one of those. I'm cautiously optimistic about Cincinnati because like I said, it's hard to not love Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase as a duo on offense, but you have to look around at the bigger picture of this team, and you just wonder where are they going to go. And I even mentioned they lost their offensive coordinator to Tennessee, so that's another piece where you're losing guys because you are a good team now. But how is that going to bite you in the butt now? Is that going to finally rear its ugly head? Looking past any injuries that have happened to you, is this just a not great team? I feel like it's something to watch with the Bengals. It's just I'm not sold on. Speaking of not sold, we move on to the team whose jersey, that's a fun throwback jersey there. If anyone can guess the number 17 from Pittsburgh with the Bumblebee jersey, it's not an old-timey jersey. It is from like when they did these throwbacks and they were terrible. I do have that Steelers jersey behind me. We talked about the Steelers quarterback situation about a week ago, where basically Justin Fields, Russell Wilson wasn't out there. Justin Fields was taking first team reps. And so we won't really touch on the quarterback situation because you know where I stand on that. I'm very skeptical on it. But where I get even more skeptical is Arthur Smith and this offense, because as a Falcons fan, I know what Arthur Smith is. I've seen it up close. It's not good. And when I look at this offensive unit, I just see a group that's just a bunch of jigsaw pieces that just don't really fit together. And it's just, clumpy, I feel like, is the word to describe an Arthur Smith offense. And this offense is giving me that clumpy kind of energy where I just don't know how any of these pieces will work together unless you get a superhuman, like Superman type of play from your quarterback, which I don't think Justin Fields or Russ is that level. Or, you really bank on this run game being effective like it was last year. And I don't know how feasible that is in today's NFL, because we've seen the Falcons do that where they just were a run first offensive team, and it puts a cap on your offense. And like I said, this isn't even a bad offensive players. It's just a weird collection. It's just an offense I don't think fits together well. It's just a weird piece after weird piece where, like I said, I like George Pickens, but would you be shocked if George Pickens really got upset being in this Arthur Smith offense? Because I saw plenty of guys last year on the Falcons get upset on the sideline. Kyle Pitts, don't think he lived up to expectations. Drake London, I think he did as good as he could under Arthur Smith. It's just a hodgepodge group that I don't think is going to mesh well in an Arthur Smith offense. And until I see it, I don't believe it. But I say that to say this defense, when looking at it, is, I think, classic Steelers. You have playmakers on all three positions, like all three levels. And, if TJ Watt can stay healthy, there's a defensive player of the year candidate. Minka Fitzpatrick the same way. Joey Porter Jr., if he grows. I love this defense. This defense would be the reason I tune into Steelers football. That offense, get it away from me. But this defense, I feel like, is very threatening. And similar to how it's been, I feel like this defense will be the reason if the Steelers are in games and if they manage to somehow sneak into the 7th seed. I just really like what they have going on there. But we'll see if they can, hold on with this offense. We'll see if Arthur Smith, maybe the Falcons were the issue and Arthur Smith was a genius all along. I am skeptical. But with that, we do have to go to a team that expectations are higher than ever. I don't think there is a team that's facing as much pressure outside of the Dallas Cowboys. I think if you look at everything on this team, there's just no real excuse now to not make the conference championship at least. And that is the Baltimore Ravens. We talked about the Titans losing Derrick Henry. And where did he go? He went to the Ravens. When you have Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry in the backfield as rushing threats, I feel like it's hard to really compete with that. It's lightning and thunder. And, the thing about most lightning and thunder rushing duos is one of those guys is off the field. One of those, you have two running backs there, and one of them, is the third down guy, and one of them's the under center guy. With, Lamar Jackson basically being the quarterback running back hybrid, and I'm not even calling him just a one threat running back, because he has proven to be a good quarterback. he does have that threat on the legs, and so he can be that lightning to Derrick Henry's thunder. And we're going to see if Derrick Henry kind of in a Ravens uniform looks like Patrick Ewing in that Magic uniform or Hakeem Olajuwon in a Raptors uniform. Those are real pictures. Go look them up. And we're going to see if that's kind of the feeling we get from this Derrick Henry in a Ravens uniform. But I'm not going to be the one to bet against Derrick Henry. He might have just enough left in the tank to give it one more run. I think this year or next year will be his, I'd say, last productive year. I mean, obviously, I think he could probably bounce around and be just good veteran running back. But when it comes to getting a lion's share of the carries, I feel like this might be it. And so I'm very interested to see how that dynamic works between Jackson and Henry in this run game and what Todd Monken cooks up. But call me a broken record because call, I guess, everyone a broken record about this Ravens wide receiver room because, my God, I don't believe in it. And it's mainly, it was okay. I think it was good last year. It was improved last year because Odell Beckham, wasn't in the lineup every week, but he was there just enough. And Zay Flowers grew into his own. I felt like he was a really good target for them, really good weapon, proved his worth. But now he's stepping up into wide receiver one, which I don't know if he is that, outside kind of threat guy. And you're asking Rashad Bateman to step up again. You're asking Nelson Aguilar to step up. And I like those guys, but I like them in that third wide receiver role or, the guy on the outside on the other side of whoever's wide receiver one while Zay Flowers is in the slot. I don't like Bateman or Aguilar being your next two guys up. So maybe they do have a guy in-house I didn't see that's going to step up, but right now that's what the depth chart says. Like I said, Zay Flowers is cool, but those other two, I'm not buying it. But then you go to their defense because, like every Ravens team, they have just a quality group on defense, just guys that probably just play the position well. Roquan Smith, best middle linebacker in football right now, maybe. Kyle Hamilton, the best safety in football. Marlon Humphrey on the outside. And like I said, I talked about this last week when they got Eddie Jackson. Just quality moves and depth that will probably prove to be pretty valuable in the coming, weeks of, NFL football when guys do get hurt and you need guys to step up. The Ravens just do that. And, I don't know they should win this division. It's one of those things, if I had to put money on it, I would bet the Ravens win this division. But like I said, will that pressure come back to bite them in the playoffs? We saw them, stutter to the Chiefs. We haven't seen Lamar really, I'd say, beat a quality opponent in the playoffs. Now, maybe I'm forgetting something, but we need him to stay healthy. We need the Ravens to really kind of step up if they want to meet those expectations that I think are rightfully put on them now that they have a two-time MVP at quarterback. And like I said, John Harbaugh's been there for a while. He's a Super Bowl winning coach and they're a consistent organization. There's no reason for the Ravens to not be in the conference championship game at the very least. We'll see how the season goes out for the AFC North. But with that, we'll stay in the division a little bit here with the wide receiver that might be moving into the division soon. Brandon Aiyuk, he could have been traded to the Steelers as I'm speaking right now because it feels like that's a move that has traction. The Patriots and Browns are two other teams that are linked to him, so he could go into this division to the Steelers or Browns. Either way, Brandon Aiyuk, I feel like to the Steelers would help them a lot for that receiving room because they don't have bad players in there outside of George Pickens, but bringing in Brandon Aiyuk, I feel like really does bring that threat on the outside. And like I said, I don't think Arthur Smith can utilize either of them to their best degree, but it's an idea that I could see working out for them. But with that, I do have to say Brandon Aiyuk on the Patriots makes a lot of sense because Patriots have a lot of cap room coming up. They have a young quarterback that they'll need to, have a guy for him to really flourish. And although I don't know if they really have the trade pieces, but I mean, I like the fit on the field. But that's another issue I should talk about here is the price of it because you're trading for Brandon Aiyuk, but you're also trading to pay him too, and that's where it gets shaky. And this is where I kind of look back to last year with the move my Falcons made when they traded Calvin Ridley to the Jaguars. And I feel like it's going to be a similar price to that because he is wanting that new contract. It's at his first contract after his rookie deal, and the Falcons didn't want to commit that long term. The Jaguars didn't commit to him long term until, after they saw the fit. And that's where I feel like the danger is here, is where if you trade for him and pay him and he doesn't work out, the fit isn't there, now you're just kind of locked into this guy who's going to be miserable for the rest of his contract, whether it's 3-4 years after. It's just a little bit of a risky move. And that's where I don't think, the teams that want to negotiate for him really have any leverage, which where Brandon Aiyuk's camp doesn't have any leverage, is like, who's going to pay that price? And I'm just not sure who's going to do it. Like I said, we'll see whether the Steelers do it or not, because it seems like that's where the most noise is right now. But I'm a little bit skeptical that Brandon Aiyuk will be on the move. But let's see what happens in the coming days. But with that, I do have to finish out here with Olympic basketball. Serbia beat Australia in overtime. Nikola Jokic dragged Serbia back from the mud. They went on a 40-14 run, sealed the win in overtime. Bogdan Bogdanovic had 17 points. And I think it just kind of proves Nikola Jokic is the best player in the world, because he's dragging the Serbia team through the playoffs to be a competitive team. And hey, what do I know? I'm just a Jokic fan. But I do think the U.S., I don't know if they beat Brazil. Let's find out together if USA did beat Brazil, because they should have. USA versus Brazil, live updates. Oh, they did. They did so, and 122-87 was the victory for the U.S. of A as of 8 minutes ago, is what this article is updated with. But with all that being said, Team USA handled business against a Brazil team that frankly is just not very good. So good for them, I guess, but hey, what do you know? So I think that'll do it for me today on this edition of Coach's Corner. Great talk on some pigskin. Hopefully the U.S. team keeps on winning. We'll see. We'll probably talk about them in the coming days, of course, when the more like gold medal games come up. But regardless, I am your host, Lucas Coach VAR. As always, make sure you like, share, subscribe, do all that good stuff for the podcast, for the YouTube channel, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Goodbye.